Assessing the sustainability of any individual product or company is a core facet of the work that we do here at Grow Ensemble. For our Buy Ensemble Better World Business and Product Directory, we see it as our duty to both identify and define what makes for a sustainable product in any category or industry. If we're to buy Ensemble, making purchasing decisions with a sense of the greater we in mind, we're considering how that purchase affects people and the planet beyond ourselves. And in our efforts to actually fulfill that duty, buying Ensemble, we believe definitions are critically important. So, if there's no agreed upon definition of sustainability, it's unclear what anyone means when they say that their product is sustainable. While this is beginning to be regulated, not yet in the US, I believe we're unfortunately far away from meaningful consumer protections. So, for the sake of setting important definitions, here we are asking, what is a sustainable product? After assessing thousands of brands and products spanning all sorts of industries for sustainability, we've come to develop a working definition. This definition comes with complexity and a list of working component parts, but I've found that it's built from three pillars: performance, planet, and accountability. And in this episode, we'll be breaking down each in turn. Let's get started. First, we have performance. There has long been some idea that to opt for an eco-friendly product, you must in some way compromise on the performance of that product. We pick this option because we feel better about its impact on the planet, not because it's the product that best serves our needs or solves the problem we have. Thankfully, this isn't the case anymore, but it also can't be. While it would be wonderful if everyone was willing to make compromises on performance as they go through the process of finding the best people and planet-friendly products that work for them, the portion of the population willing to compromise on the convenience of familiarity isn't growing fast enough. But buyers' unwillingness to compromise doesn't license businesses to negatively impact people and the planet to meet performance expectations. The responsibility of businesses, in my opinion, is that they must aspire to meet performance expectations without making a negative impact on people and the planet. So, here are the three lenses through which we assess the performance of a sustainable product. Purpose. This, of course, varies based on what category of product we're talking about, but if we're evaluating a phone case, for example, like we've done previously with the Pila case, we need to address whether or not the phone case in question protects our phone. If it doesn't, and there are frequent reports of cracked screens or damaged phones, then the case isn't serving its intended purpose. What would be the point of that product existing, right? It's also important to evaluate how well a product is serving its intended purpose on the spectrum of the whole market, not just the sustainable product market. We want sustainable products to be, at a minimum, on par with the conventional alternatives. And finally, the most philosophical on this point is asking whether the product is needed, is good, and is as simple as it can be. The goal here is to avoid buying and making junk. Perhaps controversial, but I believe that just because someone is willing to buy a particular product, it doesn't make it valuable. Walk through a Walmart or watch an infomercial. As sustainable businesses, the responsibility is to make useful things that are good for people on the planet. And as a conscious consumer, we likewise should seek to purchase as little junk as possible. Certainly, there's plenty of debate that could ensue here. What you think is good or useful might be different than me. But what's important for the sake of our discussion here is that we're thinking about this. So, our key questions to ask here: does the product serve its intended purpose? And does it serve that intended purpose well? And then lastly, is this product as simple, good, and useful as it could be? Durability and longevity. This component of durability and longevity shares some overlap with purpose. However, it's specific enough to warrant an explanation. So one of the simplest ways to make a more sustainable product is to make sure it has a long, useful life. The best example here might be a comparison between fast fashion and slow fashion. Fast fashion pieces produced by companies like H&M and Zara are made as cheaply and quickly as possible. Having a different style each week is entirely possible. Clothes are made cheaply and won't last long, but that isn't the intention. The goal here is to get garments to shelves as fast and cheap as possible while encouraging consumers to purchase as much as possible. The pieces are made to be disposable. And so by this definition, fast fashion clothing items are unsustainable. Slow fashion, in contrast, centers on clothes that are made to wear not just for a season, but for years. Slow fashion is about timeless style, clothes that are made to last, and ideally investing in the fewest pieces you need for the longest duration of time. And if or when something happens to a timeless item, you look to repair and restore to extend that useful lifespan because it's worth it, as opposed to fast fashion pieces for which the repair would far outcost the product itself. And as well, there's a question of whether the dirt cheap textiles used might not even be able to endure a repair. So this has me thinking of brands like Eileen Fisher, Patagonia. Patagonia, for instance, launched worn wear where customers trade in their old Patagonia gear for credit, and then they can buy used garments for a discounted price to extend their useful lifespan and keep more clothing out of the landfill. There are very few exceptions for why any product should be made to be disposable. It's wasteful. It encourages unhealthy consumption habits. In any circumstance, the goal of the sustainable product designer should be to create a product that's durable and has industry-leading longevity. So, key questions here are, what's the useful lifespan of the product? How does that compare to similar products? And finally, what accountability does the company take for repairs and product guarantees? Next, we have pricing. Pricing is a factor, period. It's common for sustainable products to be much more expensive than their conventional counterparts. That's okay, and it's often what's to be expected, right? The reason the conventional products are the prices they are is because brands are cutting corners and ignoring some negative externalities, be it environmental or labor or whatever. However, even with that consideration, it's important that sustainable businesses keep in mind how accessible their products are. If a product is strictly positioned as a luxury good, you'll only make a change in a luxury market. There's a difficult dance to be had with margin, but it's a conversation that more business leaders who believe themselves on the edge of sustainable and ethical business should be having. It's not okay that a sustainable brand's target audience is exclusively households with disposable income. Is the goal to make change or to make the healthiest profit? Like all points here, this discussion can be very gray, but it is critically important to have and acknowledge nonetheless. One of my greatest frustrations, for example, with healthier food, organic produce, grass-fed meats, supplements, is that it's universally more expensive in a supermarket setting. This is why issues of income inequality clearly lead to issues of health inequality. Better, more widely available options for consumers can lead to better decisions and better outcomes. In the context of food, making healthier food as least cost prohibitive as possible can lead to healthier people. For this, I like to use the example of Every Table, a restaurant that prices their menus differently based on the neighborhoods where their stores are located. So, key questions here. How does this sustainable product's price compare to the greater market? How does it compare to other comparable sustainable options? Next, let's assess the effects a product has on the planet. And when we say planet, we are speaking to both the environmental aspect and social aspect, people. What we do to the planet, we do to its people, and what we do to the people, we do to the planet. Let's start with the environmental impact. Circularity or end of life. It's difficult to argue that the future of a truly sustainable economy isn't strictly a circular economy. The highest impact piece of the product development process is often the procurement of the raw materials to make the product. As was cited recently in The Guardian's feature of Patagonia and its CEO, most of Patagonia's carbon footprint comes from the mills that make its materials. Whether that's the industrialized agriculture behind our clothes or the mining of precious metals to make the technology we use, those processes are where the bulk of emissions come from in product manufacturing. So, we should do as little of that as we can if we can only do it in a means that is extractive and exploitative. For the opposite, maybe we consider regenerative agriculture. But It's imperative that brands think about the end of life of their products if they truly want to be part of the movement towards building sustainable economies. This must be the new standard. Companies cannot go on ignoring what happens to their products at the end of their useful life. That is not solely the consumer's responsibility. And so I especially like the position that companies like Mud Jeans have taken with their programs like their Lisa Jeans program. And with this initiative, Mud is making it clear that they have ownership over the jeans that they sold you and that they are accepting accountability for what happens to those jeans when you've worn them out. So there's also a growing movement of compostable products for what would be typically disposable products. Phone cases like Pila or A Good Company, trash bags, Hold On, or food storage wrap like beeswrap, for example. If it's possible to make any part of the production more circular, it should be pursued. And so in evaluating this aspect, our key questions are, what's the anticipated end of life for the product? What degree of accountability has the brand accepted for the end of life of their product? And what, if at all, has the brand offered as a solution for the end of life for their product? We next attempt to assess what sort of energy output is required to produce a product and what type of energy is used. Preferably, a company's facilities are running off of renewables. Badger, for example, which manufactures organic body care products, runs its entire facility in New Hampshire off of solar power. They've earned the right to say that they sell sunscreen powered by the sun. So quickly, our key questions here, what energy consumption is required to produce the product, and what type of energy is consumed to produce the product. Let's then look at what materials a product is made out of and how those materials are procured. There are a few challenges in this piece to analyze a product's sustainability. There are wildly different materials used for a notebook versus a smartphone, for instance. This can take a major analysis as to what materials are in fact the most sustainable, especially as new information comes to light with time. Also, the degree to which the materials claims made are verifiable or legitimate can be difficult. We'll talk more about accountability in a second. But here's an example. There are many issues with the certifiability of organic versus conventional cotton in the global supply chain. It's estimated that anywhere from 50 to 80% of cotton labeled organic coming from India isn't in fact organic. This reporting from the New York Times undermined the credibility of even the largest champions of sustainability in fashion, Patagonia and Eileen Fisher, who we've mentioned already. This perhaps might be why shorter, less complex, localized supply chains might be easier to keep sustainable. With all this in mind, we want to be able to identify what materials we are using, how they are obtained, and how consumptive that process is. And as well, the waste involved in the life cycle of those materials. So the key questions here, what type of materials are used to make the product? Are these materials renewable? How are these raw materials obtained? And what is the expected waste produced from the procurement and use of these materials throughout their life cycle? Next, shipping and packaging. Shipping and packaging are as well important pieces of this overall discussion. The distance required for a product to travel, the packaging a product is shipped in, and as well what happens to that packaging are all important factors that contribute to a product's footprint. Some companies will make their packaging from recycled materials, ensure their packaging is compostable, or seek to offset the emissions from the packaging and shipping costs, or some combination of all the above. In the measurement of carbon emissions, shipping and transportation emissions are referred to as Scope 3 emissions. But very quickly, it's important to note carbon offsets don't, of course, wipe the slate clean. It's better to emit less in the first place. But key questions here for shipping and packaging. One, what's the environmental cost of transportation? What packaging is the product shipped in? What's to be done with the packaging after the product arrives at its final destination? Next, we turn to animal welfare. When applicable, a product's sustainability is assessed on the relationship to biodiversity and animal welfare. For example, food and agricultural businesses, or in some cases, fashion. In this scenario, I find it helpful to defer to the requirements for the Regenerative Organic certification via the Regenerative Organic Alliance. This certification ensures the humane treatment of all animals involved in a commercial operation. The animals must be provided 5 freedoms, meaning they have the freedom from any excess discomfort or distress, have the ability to pursue all behaviors normal to their species, have access to nutritious food and clean water, and they are provided with proactive and preventative healthcare. For those interested, you can see the full extent of the ROC requirements for animal welfare at regenorganic.org. But the key questions here in this section, if any animals are involved in the production of a product, are the animals treated humanely? And for this, we refer to the regenerative organic certification standards. Now, let's move on to the social or people component of the overarching section on planet. First, let's talk livelihood. The first social component of our analysis focuses on livelihoods. It's inexcusable that anyone working a job shouldn't be able to meet their basic needs, no matter their job description, no matter their geographic location. Living wages are the minimum standard. To disagree with that is to say that there's an acceptable level of exploitation in business. If a business cannot afford to pay workers who make their products a verifiable living wage, they either need to dramatically reassess their business model or cease to exist. This is one of the costs of cheap goods. As well, when workers aren't exactly employed by a brand, but merely contracted, typical of manufacturing in a global supply chain, it's important that those relationships are fair and equitable. This will mean long-term guaranteed contracts, if applicable, and fair or premium prices paid for any material or goods. Think about coffee, for example. For more, I highly would recommend diving into the resources available at fairworldproject.org. However, all things considered here, often a prerequisite for guaranteeing adequate livelihoods for any and all workers is the transparency of who, in fact, these workers are. This, overlapping with our final section, which we'll discuss later, accountability. Businesses must ensure that they know who is involved in their own supply chain. And 2, that's likewise apparent and easy to see for the end consumer. So, key questions here in this section on livelihoods. 1, is it clear where the company's products are made and who makes them? Is it clear whether or not all companies' workers are paid a living wage? And then, if the company works with partner suppliers, farmers, and manufacturers to produce their products, is it clear whether or not those relationships are fair, equitable, and long-term? Okay, now to working conditions. This, quite simply, is whether or not the working conditions for the people behind a company's product are verifiably safe. This, a rampant issue in the fashion industry, you can learn more about the Rana Plaza disaster, is an essential component of determining the sustainability of a product. If a product cannot be produced in an environment that's safe for the workers, then by our definition, that product is not sustainable. There's no level of danger or insecurity that any person must go through for the sole purpose of bringing a particular product to shelves. So, our key question here, can it be verified that the working conditions for any and all involved workers are safe? Next, we're on to outcomes. While the opacity of global supply chains can make addressing the first 2 components of our social analysis difficult, this next component can be made difficult for its more subjective nature. Our assessment of product outcomes are to determine what the impacts of a product are on the people it's intended to serve. For example, it's unclear whether any type of payday loan is ethical. By their nature, they appear predatory, capitalizing on individuals who are in desperate financial situations. Other industries are more difficult to assess. For example, the food and beverage industry. There's many complexities here as it relates to the outcomes from food and beverage products. We are all very aware of the negative effects of alcohol, for instance, but does that mean it's unethical to make wine or distill whiskey? What about ice cream or other desserts? They aren't good for us, but is running an ice cream company unethical? In this frame of thought, I think what's most important here is the expectation. If someone is producing and selling a product that they're advertising to be healthy, if in fact it isn't, that's when a line is crossed. There are plenty of examples of brands advertising their products as nutritious or healthy, but their ingredients labels suggest something different. So, our broad, open-ended key question here: what are the impacts of a product? Are people in communities better off as a result of this product existing, being sold, and/or being consumed? Onward to contribution, a little more controversial of a topic, I'll admit. So let's assess whether or not there is any sort of element of contribution built into the purchase of any product. Companies like Tom's and Warby Parker popularized the buy one, give one model. Tom's famously donated a pair of shoes for every pair sold, right? And Warby Parker did the same for glasses. This is nice and has a strong perception of doing good, but it is important that brands prioritize many of the other factors listed earlier, and more we'll talk about later, first. Not to mention, it's not always clear whether or not the give back programs companies create are worthwhile. Tom's, very admirably, solicited independent researchers to investigate the impact of their buy one, give one shoe donation program around 2010. While looking specifically at some 1,500 children in El Salvador, the researchers found the impact of the contributions not as life-changing as they were sold. So, to quote Bruce Wydick, the professor of economics at USF and head of the research team contracted by Tom's to complete this evaluation, Bruce said there was good news and bad news for Tom's in the results. The good news, Wydick explained, was that the majority of the kids who received donations loved and wore their shoes frequently. The bad news was that there is no evidence that the shoes exhibit any kind of life-changing impact, except for potentially making them, the kids, feel somewhat more reliant on external aid. So mind you, at this point, Tom's was founded in 2006. The company had given away some 20 million shoes. To me, this isn't just bad news, it's catastrophic. We cannot shake off negligible, arguably negative outcomes and still give each other a round of applause as if this was an elementary school fundraiser organized by fourth graders for lightly used shoe donations. Tom's is valued somewhere in the ballpark of $500 million today. Like many other businesses in this community, they're predicating their businesses and their brands on changing the world for the better. And often, as consumers ourselves of these various products, we might feel like for that moment of purchase, we're in lockstep with that mission too. And so, what does it really matter if we come to find that these various initiatives and give back schemes aren't truly the force for good as they are advertised, but rather just make us and others feel a bit better about buying more stuff? It runs the risk of undermining the entire movement. We're going a little long on charitable initiatives here, I know, but it's critically important here for our discussion around what makes a product and business sustainable. It's more important to focus on sustainability as part of the operations of a business, the DNA of a business, not some external charity. At best, the charity that some of these businesses engage in can be a waste of time, effort, and resources, like Tom's maybe. At worst, it's manipulative, and it undermines other businesses and business leaders doing the real work. Charity takes a back seat to allocating resources towards living wages, circularity, and the various other things that we're mentioning here. So, to summarize, contributions or give back programs shouldn't be used as a distraction or a marketing asset, while companies ignore the true potential for impact, positive or negative, through the core of their product production process. So, our key questions here: does the product have any sort of built-in contribution initiative or give back program? And if so, does this program follow other sustainable practices? On to our final section, accountability. This section of accountability is perhaps most important for the reason that it can validate any or all claims made in the previous sections. There is no reason why companies shouldn't open themselves up for third-party critique. If what a company claims in both their impact, negatively or positively, on people on the planet is legitimate, seeking external accountability should only further establish their credibility with consumers, right? So let's start first with certifications and associations. There's often a critique of certifications, labels and associations and groups. They're either too hard to obtain, cost too much money to maintain, or in some way imperfect or flawed in their assessment. There are a couple ways that companies commonly move forward based on those previous judgments or opinions. They don't participate. They might even create their own standards for certifying ethics and sustainability. Or a company can participate in the certification and seek to improve the standards alongside the certifying body. The circumstance isn't always clear, but we've found that there's good reason for these various certifications to exist. Fair trade, for example, even though they aren't the end all be all. Third-party accountability should be welcome. It's long been proven that companies cannot regulate themselves. The costs of failed voluntary ethics and sustainability commitments are far too high. We can't experiment with human and planetary exploitation. And so we see certifications as a very important signal to the level of sustainability a company is abiding by. And while, yes, imperfect, these various organizations behind these certifications are as well committed and expected to make continual progress. So achieving these certifications is also a sign of commitment. As mentioned above, they aren't typically easy to obtain, and with the work and often any associated certifying costs, they certainly aren't free. And finally, certifications assist in a quicker purchasing decision. Think about a single visit to the grocery store. How many individual products and brands are you choosing from? It's helpful that on a tea box, for example, like a Yogi tea box, you can see certifications non-GMO verified, USDA organic, and certified B Corp. These certifications help to make a purchasing decision easier. There's complications here, to be sure, and there are things that break the certification model. For example, the certified B Corporation label, regarded by many as the gold standard in certifying businesses to a degree of assessing their ethics and sustainability, has been publicly criticized for various companies that they've certified. A subsidiary of the Nestle Corporation, Nespresso, became certified in 2022, despite having a disgusting history of child slave labor, wage theft, and abusive working conditions. So I think you can make the case that relatively with more resources at their disposal and a larger potential return on their investment in aligning their brands with these certifications, the commitment and effort to certify is less significant for a multinational like Nespresso. To Nespresso, there are people to hire and money to dole out. To Dean's Beans, a coffee roaster with maybe 50 or so employees committed to setting the standards for ethics and sustainability in their industry, the effort to certify and remain certified as a B Corporation is considerably higher relative to their total available resources, money, and most importantly, people and effort. This isn't to say that the certified B Corporation label is worth trashing. It just might mean that we philosophically disagree with their theory of changing business for the better, speaking to who should or should not be eligible for certification. This comes to the main point regarding certifications, however. It's companies that make a certification legitimate, not the other way around. There are plenty of phenomenal companies that proudly display the certified B Corporation label, and for good reason. All I'd say is that with the way that any certification organization changes and evolves, it's still worth doing our homework on the company and the product in question. So our key question here, has the company behind the product earned any certifications or joined any associations that might validate any or all of their sustainability claims? So just a list of potential certifications that we look out for: Certified B Corporation, Certified Fair Trade, USDA Organic, Regenerative Organic Certified, Bird Friendly, Certified Climate Neutral, 1% for the planet. On to transparency. Along with the company's commitment to seeking out industry and product relevant certifications, the degree to which they are proactively open and radically transparent with the way in which their products are made is a critical component of our overall evaluation. So on a company level, you might be familiar with impact reports. These are reports that companies create on an annual basis to measure and report on their social and environmental progress. On a product level, we're looking more so at the transparency behind a company's supply chain and production practices. This can be a little bit more formal, like a good company, where you can see an interactive map of all their factories. This can also be more informal, like Tablas Creek Vineyard, where General Manager Jason Haas has been keeping an extremely detailed blog on the ins and outs of their winemaking process for multiple years. This is all important because it's not just about what's being hidden. It's about who is being hidden. If we honestly believe that no one, no matter the country someone is from, the stage of development of their economy, how cheap the cost of their labor is, that they should in any way, shape, or form have to risk their lives just to keep a job to provide for their families, then it is absolutely imperative that complete transparency becomes the bar. While not every supply chain is hiding sub-minimum wages, cracks in the walls, or whatever else, someone's supply chain currently is. So businesses have the responsibility to make transparency the bare minimum to doing business. And we as consumers should see that reflected by what they reveal to us about how and by whom their product is made. So our key question here, to what extent is a company proactive by publicly documenting its social and environmental progress? So clearly, this evaluation takes time. It's also a highly subjective process. The more products and companies we become familiar with, the more it feels like we can understand the broad spectrum of what it means to make a sustainable product and run a sustainable business. Of course, I know this assessment can't be done by everyone for every product. That is in part why it's our job here at Grow Ensemble. But we want to go through the sometimes rigorous exercise of defining sustainability in these varied contexts to both make your purchasing decisions easier and to likewise cast votes in such a way to support more of what we hope to see in the world. To us, that means supporting businesses that are on the journey to complete sustainability. Businesses that are more about contributing positively to culture and their communities versus building their companies at all costs. They'll identify areas of concern, excess consumption and extraction, and seek to remedy, not for the sake of checking a box, but rather creating a more sustainable standard for commerce now and in the future. And it's this is what we call doing business of saving the planet. All right, y'all, that's a wrap. Thanks again for tuning in. If you liked the show, if you had questions, comments, or feedback, thought I left anything out, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment on YouTube. I read every single one, or get signed up for my newsletter that I write and publish every single week, the Better World Weekly, where together we explore the art of living sustainably at the intersection of business, nature, and philosophy. To get the next one in your inbox, go to growensemble.com/newsletter. Till next time.